G'day guys, Disney Dave coming at you once again from Down Under with a very special video. A couple of weeks ago I had the absolute pleasure of sitting down for a Skype interview with US-based Disney historian Didier Ghez. Didier is of course the author behind the current book series They Drew As They Please, which covers the hidden art of Walt Disney animation. Didier has of course released these two previous volumes over the last 2 consecutive years and is now preparing to release his third volume. Of course the previous volumes were The Hidden Art of Disney's Golden Age, The Hidden Art of Disney's Musical Years, and the new volume will be The Hidden Art of Disney's Late Golden Age and covers the 1940s just as volume 2 in this series did, so it's sort of a 2-part deal within a 6-part long series. And let me say, this book is absolutely spectacular. I've seen it with my own eyes and browsed through it, and oh, this is fantastic. This is probably my favourite volume of the whole bunch, and that's without a word of a lie or without any bias. To be completely honest, this book series is really wonderful and really important, and is personally one of my favourite series of Disney books ever published. And once the series is complete, this really is going to be one of the most comprehensive, most important series of Disney books ever published. Didier plans to release 6 volumes of this series in its entirety. However, as I have learned since recording this interview, the future of Didier's book series may actually be uncertain, sort of depending on book sales of the new book and the previous volume as well. So down the bottom in the description I've actually put a link to go and purchase Didier's books from Book Depository and Amazon, and I implore you guys out there to go out and buy these books. Didier is doing some very, very, very important work when it comes to Disney history and the discovery of Disney artwork. Didier is so ecstatic about his series, and he loves what he does, and he loves resurfacing all this amazing artwork. And as you will see in this interview, for this particular volume, Didier has unearthed some amazing pieces which have gone unseen by human eyes for up to 70 years in some cases. This really is a very special volume, and Didier needs all your support, so please, 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 because these are some of the best things that have happened in regards to Disney historian, Disney history books for a very long time. So without further ado, please allow me to introduce you to Didier Ghez. Once again, of course I interviewed him once last year as well, but let me reintroduce you to Didier Ghez, and please enjoy the interview. Alright, how have you been?
Great. It's really funny because I literally today delivered all of the content for volume 4 of the book series.
Wow.
So
next year.
So I just delivered all of the, especially all of the art for the chapters on Lee Blair, Mary Blair, Tom Oreb, John Donne, and Walt Peregoy. Fun timing. We're going to be talking about volume 3, and I just delivered volume 4. So
are you finding it easy to keep up, or does it all pile up, or is it easy to keep one step ahead and still dealing with the previous volume?
No, it's fine. It's pretty easy. I'm quite organized. I can definitely multitask. So it's just a question of being very, very organized and having the timings very clear, and then it's fairly easy. It's a lot of work, don't get me wrong, but it's just,
as long as you keep on top of it, it's okay. Before we talk about your upcoming volume, this wonderful book, which you had the pleasure of writing a short section in, of course, on the Reluctant Dragon. What's it like to be involved in something like that, or to be asked to be involved in what is arguably one of the biggest reference pieces for Disney animation that's ever been published?
So it's obviously a lot of fun, and it's obviously an honor. It was also a very interesting challenge, because the reality is Daniel, who's the editor of the book, came to see me, and he didn't really give me a choice. He didn't really say, well, Didier, I'm working on this book. What chapter would you like to write? He said, Didier, I'm working on this book, and I have a chapter for you. I would like to write the chapter on the Reluctant Dragon. And that took me, I would say, by surprise. And also, I wasn't really sure I wanted to do that, because I really had never researched that subject that much. So after a little bit of reflection and after making sure that I could get access to the documents I needed for the research, I said yes. In fact, I put as a condition which I thought he wouldn't be able to fulfill, and he surprised me by fulfilling the condition, which was to give me access to some documents that I really wanted. So when he said that, then I was hooked. I couldn't say no anymore. So it was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun because I obviously discovered a lot and was able to really uncover a lot of documents and a lot of information and so on, which hadn't been discussed before, tapping into the Ward Kimball diaries, tapping into some story meeting notes that not a lot of people have really seen before, tapping into some information on some abandoned shorts that were considered for the Reluctant Dragon and so on and so forth. That was really fun.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. That's a really wonderful reference book, and I loved your section, especially as you said, there's not been a lot written about the subject, and that book is just fantastic for all that kind of little bits and pieces that I suppose haven't been written on a lot.
Yeah, agreed.
And likewise, your series of books, the Jurors They Please series, the Hidden Art of series. Of course, a lot of the stuff in these volumes haven't been published before. I'm holding Volume 2 and Volume 1 here. And looking forward to getting my hands on a hard copy of Volume 3, because I must say it is a spectacular volume. And this is my personal favourite era of Disney animation, the 1940s, and the films that came out of the 1940s, especially Fantasia, which is my favourite classic Disney film, my favourite Disney film of all time. Really wonderful series of books. What can you tell the viewers what sets this volume apart from the previous two?
This is, as you know, the 1940s Part 2. And first, the reason why there are two volumes on the 1940s is that, frankly, the level of creativity and the number of projects that the studio was working on in the 1940s was just unbelievable. There was no way to make it all fit in one volume. And in fact, this volume 3 in the series, instead of being 208 page long, is 248 page long. So the reality is, when I wanted to write about the 1940s, I knew from the start that one subject I really wanted to explore in depth was something I had always been very, very curious about, which was a strange department within Disney called the Character Model Department, which was headed by Joe Grant. And obviously I'd read a little bit about that in some of John Canemaker's books. I'd read a little bit about it in some of Michael Barrier's books, but I never could really understand the full story of the Character Model Department. I didn't really understand who was part of the Character Model Department. I especially didn't really understand when it started and when it ended. I really didn't understand exactly what it was doing at the time and so on and so forth. So I really wanted to understand a lot more about that. And so I started researching that in depth, and of course I also started focusing on a few of the artists who were part of that department and who were the most prominent, most creative artists, most interesting from my standpoint artists that were part of that department. Except one, which is Mary Blair, who was also part for a short while that department, but who is going to be covered on the next volume, in volume 4 in the series. And then also Joe Grant, who was the head of the Character Model Department. And frankly, I had already so much content for that volume that I decided to cover Joe Grant in the 6th volume of the series when he goes back to the studio at the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s. And so I'm going to cover obviously his whole career, but he's included in the volume about the 1990s and 2000. So I thought those artists were absolutely fascinating. And as for the previous volumes, I did discover some unpublished correspondence, especially the correspondence of Campbell Grant. In fact, when I contacted the family of Campbell Grant, his daughter told me, I might have a little bit of correspondence between my father and the person who was my mother, but who wasn't his wife at the time, was still his fiancée when he was writing all of those letters. But to be honest, I have no idea what those letters contain, because my mother passed away fairly recently, and I know we have those letters, but I haven't even read those letters. And then a few months later, she came back to me. She said, I just read those letters, and they are absolutely fascinating. And I'm so glad you pushed me to do that, because this is just great. And then she transcribed all of the parts that were linked to her father at the Disney studio. And I learned, of course, about Campbell Grant's career, but I also learned wrote about Martin Provençon, about James Baudrillard. Those were his closest friends, and Jacques Miller. And so that was very, very cool. The other thing that happened is that when I was researching the character model department, I asked Michael Barrier, the animation historian, really prominent Disney animation historian and Disney historian. I asked him for a few of the interviews he had conducted with those artists, and so he sent me everything he had. And I sort of knew that there was a guy who appeared in a lot of memos that were written at the same time, a person called John Rose, a Disney executive who wasn't part of the character model department, but who was heading a strange department, which I was also very curious about, a department called the Story Research Department. And so I was like, okay, well, since I'm covering this department from the late 30s, I'm also going to try and understand a little bit more about that Story Research Department, just because I'm curious and because it was operating around the same time period, and I can't really understand what the two departments were doing and how they fit. And so I asked Michael Barrier to send me the interview he had conducted with John Rose, but really as an afterthought, not really something that I thought would be part of the book or important part of the book or anything like that. And he sent that to me, and I started reading that interview. And at some point, I opened my eyes wide because what I just read didn't make a lot of sense. I didn't understand what I just read. John Rose said, in the late 1930s, I hired an Ecuadorian artist called Sola Franco to do a lot of concept drawings around a project that I had at the time, which was an adaptation of the Don Quixote of Cervantes to screen as an animated feature. And I'm like, okay, I'd heard about the Don Quixote project, had heard about John Rose, but had never ever heard of Sola Franco. Who the heck is Sola Franco? So I started researching Sola Franco online, and I'm lucky enough that I speak fluent Spanish, and so I found quite a few articles and quite a bit of information about Sola Franco in Spanish. And it turned out that after he left the Disney studio, he became a pretty famous painter in Ecuador. So that really started to intrigue me, and so I started getting in contact with a few people who had researched the life of Sola Franco. And what I realized fairly quickly is that he had mostly worked on that abandoned project of the Quixote, which was already fascinating in itself. I also realized is that he worked a little bit on Fantasia, a little bit on Peter Pan, which was even more interesting. After digging quite a bit, and after I think a year to year and a half of efforts, I managed to get in touch with the family of Sola Franco, and I realized that they had preserved a very important amount of letters that Sola Franco had written to his father and to his mother when he was working at the Disney studio. By that I mean that he spent about 9 months at the studio. In those 9 months, just on the Don Quixote project, he drew about 1,500 drawings in 9 months. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's a level of productivity and quality. I mean, all of these drawings are just absolutely gorgeous, beautiful, incredible stuff. And almost every day, he would write either to his father or to his mother during those 9 months. And so the amount of information that those letters contained, so I got copies of all of those letters. I then translated every single one of them. And they're not like 1 page later, they are like 3 pages, 4 pages long, all in Spanish. I translated all of that. Then another contact told me, he actually wrote an autobiography, which is really difficult to find, but I'm going to send you the whole section that deals with his career at Disney. So he sent that to me. I also translated the whole autobiography or the whole section about Disney, which was again like 20 or 25 pages. I mean, literally after having done that and reading that in the right order, it was like being with Sola Franco, like looking above his shoulder, being with him, understanding how he thought, how he drew. His personality is a little bit weird. He wasn't really a nice person, but he was a marvelously creative artist. And so that was the complete surprise of that whole process, was the discovery of Sola Franco, discovery of his art, and really now a complete understanding of how the Don Quixote project evolved from an abandoned project from the 30s to a project that was then revived in the 50s with different artists, and then revived again in the 1990s in the Disney studio in France with the Bridge brothers. And so that was a part that really fascinated me. And then I discovered a few drawings, well, at least one drawing he had done for Peter Pan of Captain Hook, which was in the book also, and one he had done for Night on Bald Mountain for Fantasia. So that was very cool. So that was a very fun discovery. That's one of the highlights. The other major discovery in that book, which actually took place when I was researching volume 2, for years and years and years, we had heard of the fact, and we had heard stories and read millions of stories about the fact that to prepare Night on Bald Mountain and to work on Chernabog, the big devil on Night on Bald Mountain, the Disney studio and the artist had hired Bela Lugosi to model for that big devil on Night on Bald Mountain. Well, there was just one problem with that story, is that no one had seen photos of that session where they filmed him or photographed him as a reference. And in fact, not even the family of Bela Lugosi knew where to find photos. They had never seen photos. They had been looking for photos for 20 years, 30 years, could never find any. And then last year, when I was researching volume 2, a good friend of mine, a fellow Disney historian called Mindy Johnson, who's the author of the Tinkerbell book and the book which is going to be released very soon on Ink and Paint. Mindy told me, well, I'm in contact with the son of a Disney artist who has quite a lot of incredible documents, and she didn't know what he had at the time. And so one of the documents that was in that collection was that fantastic David Hall drawing of Peter Pan and Wendy, which we discussed last time, which is the cover of volume 2. But the other thing that took me completely by surprise when I started looking at the documents was that there was, in that pile of documents, there was a photo of Bela Lugosi posing as Chernabog. That was such an amazing discovery 6 or 7 months ago when the family of Bela Lugosi heard about that through the Disney archives. They contacted me and they contacted a friend who had helped me find that photo and they said, we have never seen a photo. Can you show it to us? So I sent them a copy of that photo, and they say, well, we're so grateful that next time you're in LA, we really would like to invite you to dinner just to thank you for having discovered that photo. So that's one really cool discovery. We can all see a photo of Bela Lugosi posing as Chernabog. Now the next step is, if there is film of that still exists, I mean, I would love to discover that. But that's the first fun step.
I mean, even as someone from the outside looking at the PDF that you sent me of this book, which are absolutely fantastic, just looking at all of this artwork and photos and things that have never been seen by people for the best part of 70 years in some cases. It really is incredible and humbling, and just to be able to see it, be some of the first people to actually lay eyes on some of this incredible stuff. It must be amazing to be able to rummage through piles of stuff and just come up to something and go, oh my God, this is what I've been trying to find, or this is something no one's ever seen before. I can tell how ecstatic you are just telling the stories.
So without a doubt, I mean, opening those boxes that, in a lot of cases, as you said, have not been opened in so many years is incredibly exciting. And then when you make some unplanned discoveries, when you find something in a folder where it's not supposed to be, or when you find something that you would never have expected to find, it's so moving. I was researching last May volume 5 of the series, which is going to be on Ken Anderson and Mel Shaw, and I was born in 1973, and so I was born when Robin Hood was released. And so for me, I sort of grew up with Robin Hood and with the Rescuers and so on and so forth. And so Ken Anderson has always been my favorite Disney concept artist. And so when we started opening those boxes of artwork from Robin Hood that no one had seen in I don't know how many years, I literally started crying. I started crying. I was so moved by what was going on. And so the same thing with this third volume, when had read all of those stories by Martin Provincent saying, oh, my favorite pieces of Disney concept art are the ones I created for Peter and the Wolf in the style of Russian icons. When the person who helped me at the Animation Research Library, Jackie Vasquez, when she opened the box of Peter and the Wolf, and first we saw some concept done by other artists, and then at the bottom of the box, there were 4 or 5 or 6 pieces, all in pastels on a black background, and the colors just pop out of the background, and it's so amazing. And it's not signed, but it's obviously the pieces that Martin Provensen was describing in his interview, and you're like, wow, we found them, and they're at the very bottom of that box, and no one had seen them before, and this is so exciting. I mean, those are going to be full pages in the book, those are really great moments.
You mentioned last time we did an interview that your job is a little bit like detective work. You're just trying to find pieces and having to find leads and everything. I think it's absolutely fantastic, and just hearing the stories is wonderful. And you mentioned just earlier how small discoveries that you didn't expect to make sort of end up shaping the book. I mean, I'm assuming you go into writing a book with an idea of how it's going to be in the end, but then you make a new discovery and it really just shapes the book in a different way, or shapes a section of the book that you just didn't expect.
Oh yeah, it wouldn't be fun otherwise. I mean, I never know exactly until the last minute everything that's going to be in the book. Again, I mean, to give you another example, just back in May, I was doing the second part of the research for volume 4 also. I'm starting to get lost between the different volumes. So I was doing research for volume 4 and for volume 5. And for volume 4, I was doing research on an artist called Tomore. Well, I had already found a lot of stuff that no one had seen before by Tomore. And then I was checking a file. I think I was checking that file really to understand what they had in there for volume 5. And when we opened that file, we did find one fantastic Ken Anderson drawing for volume 5, which we had been looking for everywhere, and we finally found in that folder. But what we also found that was even less expected were 6 drawings by Tomore, which were early concepts for the clubhouse of the Mickey Mouse Club, for the TV show, and incredible designs for that. And literally, I don't think that anyone had seen those drawings since the mid-50s. That was just a big shock.
You mentioned that's the exciting part of your job is discovering new things. I think that's the exciting part about discovering your books especially, is that you can really tell the love and the effort that's gone into, there's volume 3, fantastic, oh it looks fantastic. You can really tell the love and the effort and the research that has gone into these volumes, because this really is stuff, and it is the hidden art, it really is hidden artwork that's just never been seen before, and you can tell that. You know, there are so many books on the market that just retread old stories and old passages and old artwork, and discovering the book and seeing new stuff, you really can tell how much effort has been put into the books. You really can feel the excitement of discovering new things. And you mentioned Sola Franco before. You'd never heard of him before. Obviously, I'd never heard of him before either, and I found that very exciting to discover, oh, well, here's this new artist that we can read about, and all this new artwork. It's just, it really is fantastic. And I have to personally thank you for doing all the work so that people like myself and fans and readers and other historians have this stuff to look at for future reference. So just, fun of reading and discovering new things of this studio that's been around for a very, very long time. And there's still things. It's 2017 and there's still new pieces of artwork coming out, new pieces of information, and I just think this series is absolutely fantastic in that respect. And I have to say that it will go down as a very, very important series of books in the future.
Thank you.
Some of my personal favourite artwork from this, I took a few notes. Jack Miller's model sheets from Peter Pan, especially his model sheets for Tinkerbell. I think are absolutely gorgeous. His work for Dumbo, Pinocchio. As you mentioned, Sola Franco's work for Don Quixote, absolutely fantastic, and his work for Fantasia. Johnny Walbridge's character designs for Alice in Wonderland. I always find it fascinating. You're always so used to seeing the Mary Blair artwork for Alice in Wonderland and Peter Pan, but then when you see other artists' interpretations of the work, I always find that fascinating, because that's not something that you see a lot. And of course, again, going back to Fantasia, Campbell Grant's work for Night on Bald Mountain, I think is fantastic. James Madrero's work on the Pastoral Symphony. I hadn't seen too much concept artwork for the Pastoral Symphony before, and I thought that was just wonderful, just staring at those pages. I found that very, very exciting. The artwork on Wind in the Willows that was published in this book as well, I found fascinating.
Yeah, if you like the artwork for Pastoral Symphony, you'll see more of it in volume 5 in the series, because Mel Shaw also worked a lot on that project. And so there's some beautiful, beautiful artwork which had not been until now attributed to him, which I've seen last time I was at the Animation Research Library, and it's going to definitely be part of Volume 5.
So you obviously have an idea from the beginning which artists you're going to cover, how the books are going to be. Obviously, you've split them up into eras, but you have a good idea of which artists you're going to explore, or does that all sort of come naturally in the process of exploring everything, or is it a bit of both?
There's a little bit of both. I knew roughly how I wanted to split the volumes, but to be honest, it did evolve. Before writing Volume 1, I, again, knew roughly which artist I wanted to include in the series, roughly where I wanted to cut off each volume, or what era they would cover, but it did evolve. It did evolve quite a bit. You would have looked at my list 3 years ago and look at what's really going to make it into the books today. I'm always a little bit greedier than I should be, and so there is actually a lot more that's making it in the books than what I thought at the beginning. In fact, at the beginning, it was supposed to be a 5-book series, and then it became a 6-book series.
Yeah, and still 6 books. You're not going to push for 7, 8, 9?
No, the publisher made very clear that would not happen. But that being said, what could definitely happen is after this series is done, why not start a new series of like 2 or 3 books? In fact, I already know which series I want to present to the publisher, but I can't discuss it yet.
Of course. Well, that sounds great. Very excited. Many more years of your work on the horizon, which is fantastic. I was a big, I loved the Disney Archives collection, the story, character, design books that they did. And I always felt so sad when they discontinued them, and then your books came on the market, and I thought, oh, wow, this is fantastic. And I think these books are actually better than those. They're very different volumes, but I'm personally enjoying exploring your ones a lot better. So you are releasing Volume 3 this year, of course, and Volume 4 next year. Do we have a title for Volume 4 that we can reveal, or can we not reveal the title yet?
We can reveal the title. So the title actually just evolved a little bit last week, so it's never finalized until it's 100% finalized. But it's going to be the hidden art of Disney's mid-century era, and so that's the 1950s and 1960s. And so Volume 4 is going to cover 5 artists. We're going to be Lee Blair, Mary Blair, Tom Webb, John Donne, and Walt Peregoy. And between you and me, I'm cheating a little bit here because Lee Blair is really not the 1950s and 1960s. Lee Blair is really the 1940s. But then again, you can't really talk about Mary Blair, who is definitely the 1950s, without talking about Lee Blair. And so, and there's another thing. His artwork is fantastic. So he deserved a chapter at some point.
I can't wait. I really, especially Mary Blair. I'm a huge fan of Mary Blair artwork. I'm really looking forward to that volume. So is volume 4 will be back to regular size again?
It's actually in the middle. So Volume 1 and 2 were 208 pages. Volume 3 is 248, and Volume 4 is going to be 232, if I'm not mistaken. Sorry, not 232, 224, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I was going to ask earlier, actually, you did mention that Volume 3 is 25% larger than the previous 2 volumes. Right. Was that something that you'd intended on going into the volume, or was it just something that manifested out of the huge amount of stuff that you ended up finding?
Well, realistically, what happened is when you look at Volume 1, Volume 1 was 4 artists, Volume 2 was 5 artists, and Volume 3 was 6 artists, and there was just no way to pay homage to those artists properly without having more pages. And so when I realized that Volume 3 would be 6 artists and that there was no way around that, I also knew that I had to ask for more pages. And there was quite a bit of pleading and negotiating and so on before But Chronicle Books is just a marvelous, marvelous publisher. And at the end of the day, what they want is make the best possible book that they can make. And so they really, really support the vision that I have for the series, and they are just the most wonderful people that I've ever worked for and with.
Is it daunting going into the next volume, or does it make it a little easier because you're obviously finding things from all eras when you're going through everything, or is it still very daunting going into the next volume and starting from page 1 all over again?
No, so really, I mean, the most daunting task was going into volume four, and the reason why that was so daunting is frankly the 1930s, 1940s. Those were eras that had been covered quite a bit, and on which I knew there was a lot of material available. Not a lot of material that had been published necessarily, but a lot of material available. About the 1950s and the 1960s, aside from the book by Hamid Hamidi, Cartoon Modern, there was really little published, and you're starting to get into eras that have not been discussed very much, that have not been researched very much, and so on and so forth. So I was really scared when I got to start researching volume four. But then thankfully I found really a lot of material that had never been released before. It was helped very much by one of the researchers at the Disney Archives, Kevin Kern, who actually dug very deep in the Disney Archives to find folders of material that really no one had seen before, and that really connected the dots in a way that I never thought would be possible. And so I started really understanding the history of all of those projects from the 1950s much better than anything that I was expecting. So that was very exciting. Starting to work on volume 5 is not as daunting. It's a volume which is going to be extremely interesting because it focuses on the 1970s and early 1980s. So it's really the transition era, the era just after the death of Walt Disney and before the Eisner era. And it's extremely interesting for a very specific reason, which is, aside from the fact that I'm going to be covering two of my favorite concept artists at the studio, Ken Anderson and Mel Shaw, the other thing that's really fascinating is the fact that, I don't know if you ever noticed, but when you take a book about Disney history these days, about the history of Disney animation, you read a lot about all of the projects until the Jungle Book, and then you don't exactly know what happens, but then it jumps to the Little Mermaid as if there was nothing in between. And so I find that incredibly frustrating, and so I really wanted to start writing the history of those years in between, understanding a lot more about the making of the Aristocats, about Robin Hood, about the Rescuers, about some small projects like Bedknobs and Broomstick and Pete's Dragon, and so on and so on. So it's very exciting. There isn't a lot of material that's preserved in the most logical places, but then I've started to discover a few really cool collections of documents that no one had seen before, which are starting to shed a lot of lights on those years. And so I'm at the very beginning of that research, but I'm starting to get really excited about the whole thing because, the discoveries are just very fun. It's slightly easier in some ways because some of the people who were involved in that history, especially the second generation of animators, the one that were trained at CalArts and so on, they're still around, and I can still interview them and so on. So that's helpful. But it's really fun. It's really fun to discover all of that new material.
Yeah, that's going to be a really good one to have a look at. Do you have any other projects you're working on at the moment? I know you're always working on 101 little bits and pieces.
Yeah, I do. So a couple of projects that I'm working on at the moment. A few days ago, I delivered to Theme Park Press the manuscript of the second volume of the Snow White's People. So those are interviews that were conducted by a historian called David Johnson, and I helped him edit those interviews, wrote a short introduction and so on. And so that should be released, I think, next month at some point. The other manuscript that I delivered, on which I was doing the editing, is we discovered recently the lost autobiography of a Disney story artist called Leo Salkin, and also part of his diary. And so it's actually really fun stuff, especially about the 1950s, and also about his career in animation in the 1930s. So that's a very fun little volume, which is going to contain a lot of photographs, lots of illustrations. Not so much the illustrations are not going to be Disney related, but there's a lot of stuff in there that's going to be just really fun to explore and to read. I'm finishing up Walt's People Volume 20, so I don't know when that's going to be released, but I'm working on that at the moment. And then I'm expecting, while I was researching Volume 5 of DIDIER GHEZ, They Pleased, I stumbled upon an unpublished autobiography of one of the artists who worked a lot in the 1970s. And so I'm awaiting eagerly at the moment the manuscript, which I haven't read yet. And people have been looking for that manuscript apparently for years and years and years, and I managed to locate it. And so I'm really excited. But until I get my hands on it, I'm still very, very anxious, and I won't be able to relax until I get it.
That's brilliant. Well, plenty of little bits and pieces to look forward to, and again, Volume 3 out this year, and then we've got a few more volumes to look forward to, and I hope next year we can speak again for Volume 4, and then we can speak again for Volume 5, and you can tell some more stories, and it's always fantastic to hear from you and hear your stories. Thank you so much for your time, for slotting me into your busy schedule, and having a chat about this volume. Thank you so much. It's been really wonderful speaking to you again.
Dave, that has been a pleasure. It really has been a pleasure.
Okay, well, thank you once again, and again, thank you again for all your wonderful work in these books. I really am, I'm loving them every time I get to have a look at them, and I'm really looking forward to getting a hard copy of this new volume, which I'll be purchasing as soon as it becomes available.
Cool. Thank you very, very much. Have a great, great day.
You too. Have a good evening. I'll speak to you soon. Thank you once again for joining me for this very special interview with Didier Ghez. Once again, down below I've posted links to go ahead and purchase the 3 current volumes of Didier's book series. Of course, I posted Book Depository and Amazon links down there. My personal favourite being, of course, Book Depository, who always pull through with some amazing deals. But please don't hesitate. Go ahead, support Didier and support this incredibly important research and publications of Disney history materials. It really is very special. It's something that means a lot to me and a lot to Didier. So once again, thank you for watching, and I hope a few of you do go and purchase even at least one of his books. So thank you once again for joining us for this interview today. That just about rounds this up. If you're a first time viewer of my channel and you've liked what you've seen and you'd like to see some more, then please give me some support, and after the jump, hit subscribe. After the jump, you'll also be able to find my previous interview with Didier Ghez from last year, in case you didn't see it and you want to check it out as well. To all my regular viewers out there, thank you once again for joining me, and to absolutely everybody out there, I hope I'll see you again soon. Until next time though guys, take care, and I hope you have a magical day.